There we go. Live on the Elephant and Castle Facebook page. Hi, everybody. I'm Nick from Retribe. Joining me today is Laura Derbyshire. She's the CEO and founder of Oser, which is a consultant specializing in marketing, strategy, and branding for startups and investment. She's an amazing woman with an amazing career, 20 plus years in advertising. And she's come into my life and Retribe's life just at the right time when actually we were looking for help with regards to the growth and transformation of our business. So really happy that she could come on and join us today and just have a chat about her world and her company. So Laura, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
Great, I'm good. Thanks, Nick. Great you're on here. Yeah, I'm really good.
Awesome. Can you introduce yourself and just kind of give a couple of minute background of who you are and what you do just for the page?
Yeah, so I've been in advertising. Well, I've been in advertising. I started off as a graduate about 23 years ago. So I've worked in quite a lot of global ad agencies. I always knew I wanted to set up on my own at some point. I finally got around to it about nearly 3 years ago now. Yeah, I've worked mainly in ad agencies, and then I sort of pivoted over and did for a media agency. Involved in the startup investment world, and that's when all the stars aligned, and I thought, okay, this is what I want to do. So I set up Oser. Yeah, and I've really enjoyed it ever since, to be honest.
You've worked for some big names in advertising over the last 20 years. I noted like Iris and JWT. Those are pretty prestigious names in advertising. I think everyone thinks of advertising as being that Mad Men, Ogilvy and Mather, Wall Street, like Fifth Avenue, like all these kind of glamorous things of what advertising is. Has it been, that glamorous kind of Mad Men world for you over the last 20 years? What was advertising like?
Yeah, I mean, look, it is a little bit, it's fun. As a career, I'm really glad I chose it, and especially in my kind of 20s and 30s, because I had time. It's the advertising agencies I'd say they can be they're tough, they're hard work, but they're also a lot of fun. So you get to meet some great people, you get to meet some really creative people, working on some interesting accounts. You can fly over the world going on TV shoots. I kind of did all channels, so I worked across all sides. So I did also festivals as well, which luckily I did in my 20s because they were long hours, but also lots of fun. So yeah, I as a career choice, it's definitely a good one. But yeah, they can be hard. They can be hard as well. There's lots of long hours. There's clients, the pitching, which you can be working weekends, working at night. But that looks interesting. I found it really interesting, and the people are good. So.
It was a career that I found myself getting into too in the mid to late 90s. Started off a branding company with some really beautifully creative, wonderful young men from St. Martin's College. And they went on to the company evolved into what is now known as Moving Brands today, which is, one of the largest independent branding companies on the planet. And that was a company that, I was co-founder of in 1996. And it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. And I went down another path. I kind of got caught in the bright lights and the glamorous side of things of advertising. And it kind of pulled me down a different path. And, hence they're where they are. And I ended up going down the path that I went down. But I mean, we talk about advertising as being quite exciting. And it was certainly, like I say, it was really fun at the young stages. And do you think advertising is still like that when people start to get into it? Is there still that kind of playfulness and that kind of the creativity can flow, or has it changed a lot over 20 years and have things become a little different structures and creative processes?
Yeah, I think there is some change. I think the industry's changed because obviously the sort of digital online world means that you can measure everything. So before, everything was sort of, you would do research. There was a lot of pre-work around what you would do, and then you would sort of fling an idea out, and then there wasn't lots of ways to be able to measure whether something had worked as well. Whereas now you can change stuff, and I think because everything happens so quickly, and there's a lot, there's so much more in a campaign now. You think about how much content goes out for a campaign, whereas one, you had a lot of time to really think about what you were going to do and not as many creative assets at the end of it. So now I think, because it's just so fast paced, sometimes you can lose some of that creativity, that spark, because it requires time, and it requires, the thing about creativity is, the minute you try and make it functional, the minute you try and make it something where, it's like hour by hour, you're supposed to be doing something and this is the output you need to do, the minute you then start to lose that brilliance of creativity. So if you're too in the doing and not around being able to let things just percolate in your head, you won't get to some interesting creative ideas from that side. So I think we're probably all guilty of always being on and rushing people through things, at the detriment of creativity.
I suppose like the success of an agency at any level is the business structure itself, right? The systems that are employed within organizations, because you can't just have a group of people coming up with really good ideas and then another group of people that are really good looking, I was going to say good looking and wearing suits, but that's not true. But you're bit of a slip there, but your account management on one side, your creatives on the other, and really it's like what I saw when I was at Gyro was there was a great communication between creative and account handling side of things, and I think that made it was really enjoyable for me to watch, just to be able to see the flow.
I mean, and that's the area that, because I was an account handler. But I really enjoyed the strategy and I really enjoyed the creative side. So I used to, no matter what agency I joined, I would always gravitate to the kind of head of strategy and the planners, and then also the creative. So I was lucky that in the agencies, even so, I worked at JWT Manchester, and a fantastic creative, Andy Cheetham, who was JWT actually bought Cheetham Bell, so he was Andy Cheetham, or still is, and I worked really closely with him, and he's extremely talented, and I got to be able to get really, really close to the sort of the creative side, and also with the planner, who at the time Steve was the head planner. And so in various agencies, and also with Iris and other agencies I worked in, I would be working directly with the creatives. So you're right in there. And sometimes, because a creative idea needs a bit of work. So it needs the setup, it needs the strategy, it needs the thinking, but then it's a bit, it's malleable, and it's a process that if other people are allowed into it, you grow an idea really well. So the creatives obviously can come up with these great ideas, and then a good account handler or a good strategist, I think, kind of pushes those ideas and pushes them to get to better stuff, and knowing what the client needs and what the brand needs. And then you get to something that's even better because you've all worked together. Like you say, it's like a joined up approach. It's good. When it works, when you get that dynamic, and when it works, it's such an exciting process to be in, because you start with something and then you end up somewhere else, and no one quite knows how you got there, but everyone works together somehow. And
I found like when I was always working in kind of like after the Gyro days, for me, I was working in companies of kind of like like 15 and under in terms of the amount of people working on projects at one given moment. And it was at a time where I suppose you could become a jack of all trades, really. For me, like I kind of was producing stuff, doing a little bit of directing, held a camera a little bit, doing a little bit of a lot of client facing sales, and it was a lot of fun to kind of have my foot in each kind of little camp for a bit. But I suppose I never became an expert in anything. I know you and I were talking a little bit before we went live that you were told to specialize in one area. And I suppose once an agency gets I suppose over 50 people, then you can start having specialty areas, right, within the agency. But what was your experience like with people trying to say you need to specialize in one area?
So I used to get it quite a lot from recruiters, because I started off, this is how long ago I started off. There was the big above the line, below the line. Above the line was the TV. If you were below the line, you never went above the line, all this sort of madness. And I started on a graduate scheme, and I think I genuinely thought I was joining an ad agency. And actually, I was joining a below line ad agency and didn't really understand the difference. So at one point, I was kind of working on direct mail, which was not the glamour of TV advertising that I thought of in my head. So I always had it that I wanted to do TV at some point. And actually, when I went to JWT, that's the first time I had done TV. And I think I was about sort of 29, 30 when I started doing that. And that was quite a late age to suddenly jump ship and go over to the sort of TV side. But I really wanted to know what it was like. And I had quite a few recruiters just saying, you know, jumping around, you've done, well, I was the first. So when I was a graduate, it was kind of like the internet was kind of really getting going. And so I was the digital person. I remember I worked on The Economist. And I used to look at, because I always like digital stuff, so I kind of looked after some of those projects. But yeah, so I'd done some digital, I'd done the direct mail, I'd done kind of CRM, and then I jumped through and I did lots of events. So I went into kind of experiential side and events and festivals for brands, and then I did this big switch and did TV, and then I also did a bit of in-house client, so becoming the marketing and PR for an agency as well, and new business at one point. So I pretty much covered everything. But yeah, I was warned against it. I was told that I was going to be hard to place, and that wasn't a clever idea. But I also, like to your point before, I did switch around a bit in terms of agencies and then also independent smaller ones. And actually there was something to be learned, obviously, across each. And the smaller independent agencies, you wear different hats, and if you're not sure how to do something, you just have to figure it out and you get on with it, which is which has stood with me, you know, to this day, to just be proactive about, you know, what you want to do and who might be able to help you in different, when you're looking at doing something new. But yeah, so I did jump around quite a bit, whereas now actually it's really useful, because when I talk to clients, I know enough about each area to be able to advise, so they don't have to go to 5 different people. I can just advise on quite a lot of different, because, you know, once you've done something, you know how you change it next time, and once you've done it 3 times, you know how to do it. So.
In that, I really like the fact that you and I both got involved just around with the birth of the internet, you know, and where digital became a word, digital advertising. It's like, ooh,
a new thing.
Yeah, you know, and I'm wondering, like, over the years, because I mean, I suppose I haven't really been involved in advertising or film production for over 6 years now. And I'm wondering, like, in the kind of time that you were there, did you have a favorite? Was there a sweet spot, like a golden age, where you're just like, wow, I wish it was like that again?
Well, I think when I was doing the TV ad, we had, so probably about 10 years ago, though, you know, you had time and you had massive budgets to do things. And I think now, because there's just so much, the volume of content that's needed. So obviously you've got the big agencies still doing, you know, big kind of brand campaigns, conceptual campaigns for the huge brands. But then there's a lot of other companies which are just need lots of volume of content. So I think, yeah, it's faster paced, and the money is split. It's different. So yeah, 10 years ago it was very fun. Although I would have liked to have done the whole New York back in the 90s. I think that would have been really fun.
Yeah, I think those first few episodes, or maybe the first season of Mad Men, I was like, wow, that was pretty crazy. Yeah. Madison Avenue, right? That's Madison Avenue. Yeah, that would have been a pretty interesting time. I don't think I would have survived. I think that's probably in my life, with the way I was going, that's probably why I ended up down the path that I was going. Because if I was like back then, I would be dead.
Well, you've got to. It's funny because it's very, it's pretty hedonistic. But I'm not. You know, I need my sleep and I need my health. So I juggle. I'm like, you know, I'm kind of. It's like I'm having fun, and then I'm really got my head down and I'm just working and sort of relaxing. So even though, you know, there's lots of opportunities to be having fun at agencies, I was fairly good at juggling it.
It makes me wonder too, like, a lot of people will say, does advertising work? And as you're talking to, it's made me think about the evolution of kind of moral advertising, and where people are getting it into causes and stuff. And people are like, you know, why does Coca-Cola need to advertise now? It's got it. But obviously with the budgets that they spend on advertising, there still is a need for brands to advertise. And I suppose if you're a small company that's just trying to figure their way out in the world, and you've got just enough money to pay rent and your staff and keep the Wi-Fi going, what's, when, and, to oppose to the millions that are being spent up for the big brands, like if you're, I suppose for somebody who listen to this, who's running a small to medium-sized company, and they're just trying to figure out, the importance of their brand, because brand and marketing and advertising, they all kind of have separate little aspects to it. But I suppose it's getting the message out there so ultimately they can sell products. So, how would a small to medium-sized company start looking at advertising? Who's going, do I need to start allocating a budget for it? Is social media, do I do it all on Facebook? Do I do it all on Instagram? That kind of thing. And where are there still avenues for traditional marketing for small companies? What do you think on those thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the tendency, I don't know, is somehow like in human nature, the tendency is to just go big and to think, oh, we need to go and do all this stuff. Whereas actually, a lot of the time, I think when I kind of work with clients and when they're thinking about the budget, it's really thinking about what you need to do. So, the first thing is just, what are you actually trying to do next? So if you're a small company, you've got X number of customers, and that you need to get, your next stage is to get to double that, triple that, however what you want to do, up the percentage uplift of the people that you've got, then you're just creating a little plan for that step in the business. And I think it's a lot easier to think of it, and you're much more likely to get somewhere if you've got a clear goal and you understand exactly what you're trying to do. And then you just look at who your audience, and where are your audience, and how much money have you roughly got to spend to acquire this number of people, and then what's the smartest, most efficient way to do it. But then for me, this is where the creative side of what I love really comes out, because if you think about it, especially with all the digital media, is everybody's playing the same game. So everybody, you can optimize. So a lot of the stuff that you're doing is testing, optimizing, trying to get, essentially you're looking for, what is your CPA? So what is your cost per acquisition to get somebody new, so that you can start to get into a position where you can go, okay, if we spend X amount of money, we can get this amount of new people. Therefore, this is how much we need to get to that new stage. And then you can forecast. And if you're looking for investment, you can then say, we're going to grow by this amount, and this is how much money we need to be able to acquire those people, rather than just kind of, oh, it happened, or sure how it happened. Like, you need almost a formula for how to grow and how to get people. But then everybody's doing that. So everyone in the digital space is looking at how to get to the more targeted audience, the messaging that works harder, what your proposition is. So tightening the proposition, making sure your messaging is on point, making sure you're going to the right people, and then the cheapest format to be able to get that message out. Because what you're trying to do is get someone's attention, tell them what you do, make them want to go with you, and then do a particular action, sign up, buy, whatever it might be. But that bit, so that can be done in quite a functional kind of mathematic formula way. And this is when I was working at the media agency, this is the bit that I really started to understand, but the interesting thing for me was that media side plugged into the power creativity. So there's optimizing media, which everyone does. And if everyone's good at it, you're all going to end up in the same place with the same amount of money, roughly. But then once you've got that, if you can then add in something that stands you apart, that differentiates you, that has a creative idea to it, that's something that's interesting, that's born of your message, then you can triple times out your competitors. You can do something really interesting. And that's the bit that I get excited about.
There's a couple of things I want to go into now, but that's this. One is the idea that people think that by them just posting inspirational quotes, or a quote about their product, or a small little video of themselves, that's going to create a pipeline to business. And I think that's so how smart are the algorithms of things like Facebook and Instagram? And then how smart do the people who are advertising on it need to be, like you say, to kind of come up with a plan? Because it's no good just posting a quote. There's got to be some kind of plan or a call to action. you know, to make sure that you get some ROI on you, maybe doing a ad buy or a boost or anything like that with regards to these social media platforms. Because I do think that is a bit of a thing that people who have a small company think, if I just keep posting on Instagram, you know, they will come. And that isn't true, is it?
No. I mean, look, if you've got some major influencer and you've got some product that they're saying is brilliant, and it is brilliant, then it may happen, it can happen. But you're right, that the tendency is to think, and also there's a real tendency to think, oh, we want to get more people part of our staff or using our service or downloading our app, whatever it be. We'll go to a digital ad agency and give them some cash and they can make it happen. And actually, it's a bit like what we talked about before with the creatives and the process of the joined up. We spend, before we start doing any sort of paid social, we have sessions and we talk with clients about what's your organic social like, and what are you trying to achieve with your pay, and what are you going to do to follow up on this, and how are you going to keep this campaign going from your side whilst we're keeping it going from our side. And we worked with so a couple of years ago we worked with 3 or 4, I think, different clients who were all trying to do paid social. Now the one that won out the best, they just had a brilliant, like they were in control of their own sort of organic owned social, and they did such a good job that what it did is it just meant that when we were doing the paid, it just really enhanced it. It was this bakery looking to test and do online whilst they couldn't do retail, and it worked really well for them. But they had a strong brand, they had someone managing it, they knew what they were wanting to get out of it, they managed the comments, they made sure that they were posted on a regular basis but not too much. And so we kind of did a bit of work with them as to what to do on their own, and then we came in and we did a joint approach in terms of from the paid, and we were constantly communicating. And then they've got to then obviously, and then what we were also doing was checking, where does that consumer journey break? Because once it's out, you want to spend the whole time being, how many people went from this, what do you want someone to do? So if you need to think about the brand versus performance side. So there's a constant little dance between the brand awareness and then trying to get someone, like the more sales, like trying to get someone to do something, and then what you want them to do, and then making that really easy so that link from sending something out to them actually going on your website is just a very short, easy process that no one can go off tangent. So you just want to keep it as focused as possible. And all of that means constant feedback, constant changing, constant info, making things better, optimizing. You want to spend at least a month or so just optimizing what you've got before you start spending more and more money on it. So you've got to be clear on what you want, and then you've really got to have a plan, and the messaging's got to be right, the call to action, like you say, has got to be right, the own social's got to be there, and then you want to point someone and then make sure you follow up quickly or retarget, because one ad out in the ether is not really gonna, it's not the answer.
It isn't, because I've tried it, and but
we've all tried it.
Yeah, I'm also very aware that I said there was going to be 2 things off of that last question, and I forgot the second thing. So there was that's a great explanation, Laura. I appreciate that. I was gonna you're a woman who knows an awful lot. When you speak from a place of like, wow, she can see things and strategize stuff about, if you're here, you can get to here, but it takes a lot of work. It's not going to be some magic pill that like, oh, you make these posts and like say everything's going to be hunky-dory and you're going to sell loads of product. So you went from working in advertising for 20 years to having this wealth of knowledge. What spurred you on? Like, what was the thing? Like I know you had we were speaking again earlier, you had a good experience working in the workplace that again are very traditionally masculine and can be quite, patriarchal and misogynistic, but your experience was you had great male leaders and you learned an awful lot. So that's a great experience, but what was the thing that made you go, oh, you know what, it's time for Laura to start Oser and just go out on your own, and wasn't that scary?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it was. But it got to the point where, look, my dad ran his own business, so he worked for Shell for a long time, and he broke off on his own, and he had 3 kids, and he set up on his own. And I was younger then, so I didn't remember him being nervous about stuff, but I know that he was pretty nervous that I was going to pay the mortgage and stuff. I don't have kids. I don't. So from that side, I feel like I just had myself to make, to worry about from a kind of cost point of view. But I guess maybe seeing my dad having his own business and seeing the freedom it gave in terms of deciding how he, managed his own time and his own boss and all that kind of thing, I think that really appealed to me. And I always had it. I think my friends say, like at uni, I always said, oh, I'm going to run my own company. Well, going out the whole time. But anyway, so I'd always had it in the back of my mind, but it took me a amount of time to get there. And I think I was in a couple of, so I went to the big agencies, but I also spent time in some smaller independent agencies, which gave me like, it was like I was sort of in a blueprint of how it's done, but I wasn't running it myself. But I'd always had this desire to give it a go, to run my own thing. I like the idea that I could implement whatever I wanted to implement, that I could move as fast as I wanted to move, that I could explore everything that I was interested in exploring. And so I always had that in the back of my mind. And my friends were always like, when are you going to set up this thing? Like, you keep talking about it. And I went to this media company, which was completely, off-piste, because I'd spent 20 years doing ad agency, and then I suddenly did a media agency, which is a bit random, but actually was really interesting. So I think once I joined there, and this was part of a VC, it was part of a VC fund. So then I got into a couple of like Goldman Sachs symposiums where they had angel investors, and kind of there was startup pitching, kind of Dragon's Den style. And I just sort of entered that world, and I thought, okay, I feel like I couldn't quite imagine how I was going to do it, because I was working in agencies with these huge, massive clients. I was working with like Samsung and huge, like Budweiser, and these huge brands, and I couldn't quite see how I was going to then, just rock up as me, and what client would I get. And then when I broke into this sort of startup world, that's when I could start to imagine how it could happen. And then I think it was more just it's now or never. Like, I have to have a go at this. What's the worst that can happen? The worst going to happen, it fails drastically, and I'll go back to a job. Like, I'm sure, I've got all of this experience behind me. So actually it wasn't as hard, but it was weird leaving a big salary in an agency, and suddenly, me kind of sat there with a laptop being like, okay, what happens now? But also really liberating and really exciting, because it's scary. But when things are scary, it's like you're scared and excited at the same time. It's a really weird feeling. So you feel really alive, because for once you're not sure how you're paying the mortgage, or how, like, what's next. You can't see the next 6 months because you don't know what's going to be. But I did plan things. I saved up money, and I planned. I had the whole idea for what I was going to do. And then I was so into it and so passionate about it that I was networking. The hardest thing was the pandemic, because that was, I was a year in, and then that hit. That wasn't ideal. But that was a good point for me, because I think that's the point where I'd have said, okay, all my clients have gone, this is a nightmare, I'm going to go and consult somewhere, or do something else. I'll just press the emergency eject button. But I didn't. I had this, and that was like that's when I knew that this is, I thought, okay, this is happening now, like, this is what I'm doing. Because at that moment when everything went wrong, and I really was scared then, like that, that really was daunting. That's when I just had this thing in my head where even though I didn't know what I was doing, I had no idea what was going to happen, I just had this thing in my head where I just thought, I haven't come this far to only get this far. And I just somehow just got, okay, I'm going to offer free services. I'm just going to keep myself out there. I need to keep busy. There's all these startups that need help. So I just started kind of speaking to people that I'd worked with and said, look, if you need any strategy, everybody needs strategy. I'm here. I might as well make myself busy and useful. And then after doing that, I just had this feeling that if I was just doing things which are positive and useful, that somehow the universe would reward me at some point, it would come back. And it absolutely did. Yeah, I got this, started working with Citywire, this amazing company. They made me non-exec on their board last year. I mean, it was like the dream scenario, to be honest. So, yeah.
It's amazing. It's a great story of having an idea. And and you said I had this idea. So let's go into that. What was the idea? When you had the idea, what was it?
So the idea was about, I felt that within the startup world, I felt the really interesting space for bringing in more of a consultancy-led sort of business consultancy with the power of creativity, and then obviously kind of marketing, branding sort of thrown into there. But I knew the areas I was interested in were, business, startups, innovation, creativity, and obviously the stuff I'd already done, which was all the kind of investment side and the kind of, and so from the marketing side. So I sort of just followed I did like a little kind of Venn diagram, and I just thought, okay, I'm interested in these three things. I'm just going to go out into the world with all three of them, cross networking, cross events to people in each of these sort of little circles, and just see what happens, and start to hone my proposition and what we're about as we go along. And I kind of thought, it was almost like a startup product, sort of putting something out into the world and then just adapting it based on, I'd get client feedback and speak to people and say, what is that you found interesting about what we've done or what I've been doing. And then I crafted the sort of product off the back of the stuff that was useful to people. So it's ever evolving. But I always knew that I wanted to be in startups, and the advertising world didn't quite have enough of the business side for me. I think that's where you're working on a campaign, and to some extent, if you've got good strategists and you've got good marketing directors at a brand, a company, then you are very clear about what you're trying to do with this piece of work. But in some of them, it's quite, you're just like, here's a brief and let's respond to it. Whereas I wanted to go back a stage and say, what are you trying to do as a business? And then let's see, and also I did have this bugbear about everything has to be brilliant. Whatever happens, you're always saying you're so positive to the client. And I was sort of like, well, that isn't really how business works, and especially in the startup world. So, I've kind of found my place, because, you've got to be a bit risky to try things, but you've got to be willing that things aren't always going to work. But if you're taking those risks, sometimes that will work and really push you forward. So I had this whole idea about it's okay to, you want to test stuff, and sometimes things aren't going to be right, and we'll just be open and honest about where that is. And then but you learn from things being wrong as well. So rather than telling clients, oh, this is great and everything's great, you want to be like, well, this is great, this hasn't worked, this is what we're going to do about it, this is what we think, let's chat about this could be interesting, let's think about how could we make that better, or why isn't that working, or move on from that and go to something. So I think that, because you would blame the media agency blames the creative agency, you just go on this sort of batting from one side to the other. And I think it's a bit more of a realist. So I was like, well, it's a business, so there's always things going on with businesses, good, bad, and different. It's not a perfect situation where you start doing something and everything's great. So yeah, that allowed me to be a bit more honest around what was happening.
How on LinkedIn there's always this title, The Great Resignation. Everyone's talking about the great resignation. And I've read a little bit more into it, and some pretty large articles that I've read into it. And it seems to me that it doesn't really seem like a lot of people are quitting their jobs. It seems like maybe there's a lot of talk around people not fulfilling purpose. And I'm wondering whether or not there was something inside of you, Laura, that was like, there's a greater purpose to me than sitting in a big agency and doing all this wonderful work. Or maybe there is this, was this idea of these areas that you're really good at, was there any kind of purpose of you wanting to try to, I don't know, just create something that had a little bit more meaning, or
100%
purpose driven for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, that's what it's all about. It's finding something. And I think I had this feeling like I wanted to, exactly that. So I had this thing where I wanted to, there was sort of something inside me that I had to bring out. I didn't really know exactly what it was going to be or what form or how it was going to happen, but I just knew I had to do it. And when I was at other agencies, I was sort of almost doing it with like stabilizers on. It wasn't, because it wasn't quite mine, and I couldn't quite do anything that I sort of wanted. I mean, I was lucky. I was in quite a few agencies that really allowed me to, I was in roles which are sort of weird hybrid roles that didn't really exist, or they create a role around me, and it was all a bit. So I had quite a lot of freedom, and I could work dictate pretty much how I wanted to work and what things I would work on. But yeah, there was this sense of, I felt this sense that I just wanted to like get out of this box and just kind of run out and do something. And so that first year was just me really just, experimenting with stuff, and just that feeling of actually doing it was, even if I'd have only done that for a year, that probably would have been quite a useful thing to do, just to get that out of me, because I needed to do it. But yeah, 100%. So I feel, and I think that I'm lucky that I get to be able to do the stuff that I enjoy. So, I get to work with, well, like yourself, we've had some great, great kind of strategy sessions, and I really enjoy it. So, you want the things that you enjoy. It's kind of the classic saying, but it's true. It's very true.
I think what's really valuable for anybody, who's got a smaller company who's listening to this is going, what's in it for me kind of thing. And I go, if you started your own business and it was purpose driven and you wanted to make, I don't know, like these things, widgets, like a case for something, and you're really good at making these, you're really super, you're one of the best ever making these. But between making these, you've got to set up your accounts, open up your bank account, get an accountant. I recommend that. Build a website, come up with a brand, do all the, and all of a sudden you're spending 80% of your time creating the structure so that you can make the widget, but then you haven't been able to make your widget so well. And I think that's why, like I so value somebody like yourself to come in and say, do you know what, we can let us carry that load a little bit. Because we want you to still, especially with the startups, so many beautiful ideas out there and a lot of money to be invested in people. But then there still is this thing of like, throw it against the wall, and if it sticks, it works, rather than actually having some strategy behind it. And that's why I say, for anybody listening, to get in touch with you, because it is just, even in the conversations, it takes a little bit of a load off for me to understand that my ideas alone will not stand up. I need to have systems and structure and organization behind it all, which is something that I'm not good at. But being able to hold up my hand and say, I'm not good at that, but I'm really good at doing what I do. So to have someone come in and consult and to give you some strategy around where you are and where you can be and how to get there. Because it's really good saying, in 5 years, I want to be doing this and this and this. But it is an awful lot of work, isn't it? And it's and like I say, that's why I'm really grateful that there's people like you and your company out there that people can come to. And I'm interested now to know that over the last couple of years, you said the pandemic, it's affected everybody. But do you think that, I suppose, the world of capitalism, advertising, marketing, branding, strategy, it's so big and behemoth. Like, did the last 2 years, was it a hiccup in the road? Have things changed? Or are we back to the kind of the same old stuff around business structures, organizations, startups, investments? Or has something shifted a bit?
I think some things, but the world's not static. So things are always moving. I think just the pandemic just sort of supercharged things. So I think everybody, I know, for example, Citywire. So it was interesting. I started working with Citywire a year and a half ago. So I kind of saw how they transitioned over the pandemic, and they really invested over that time, and their business has benefited so much by them having the confidence to it. It's been going for 20 years. It's really smart people running it, and they invested in that kind of downturn, and now they've come out the blocks and they're doing incredibly well. And I think, but they were always looking at thinking about maybe remote working or the digital side of things, but it would have been over like maybe 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, whereas suddenly it was switched in a second. So I think there's also within in the world that I operate in, within the startup world, obviously there's all these ideas that have been born. There's new startups that have been born constantly. So, and in terms of the investment side, there's the amount of money, with the world, and people are that money's there to be invested. So that's going on all the time. But it's just what are people investing in? And obviously, if you were in a position where you are offline and you were only in retail and you didn't quickly move, you might have suffered. There's I work with a lot of very smart startups and founders who I talk to, and they all moved. They could transition quickly. So from my side, there was quite a lot of companies that maybe changed quite a bit over that period, but all the ones that I know of actually stronger out the other end. So I think if you had offices, and if you were like restaurants, obviously certain sectors, it was very tough indeed. So
I'm wondering about the kind of balance now that people have with setting up their organization. If they're let's say an advertising agency, and how much are they going to invest in that creative spot? Because I do remember, like I say, we had offices in Chelsea Harbor, and it was so wonderful to be around people and to see designers still freehanding stuff on I don't know, sketch tables, and it was just really cool to see it. And it was really cool to be around people and say, hey, I want to go out for lunch. Let's go for lunch. And you'd have these things. So there was still this human contact. And I'm wondering now with startups, how important is it for them to be able to say, we still need human contact, but hey, we can also work remotely. And is it something that you're seeing a lot of, which is now that this is a major consideration about, how much money people are going to spend on office space, but still, get people to have face-to-face contact?
Yeah, it's different, I think, for different sectors and depending on who you are and what your team's like. But I think in some respects, there's some companies they're almost adopting that sort of advertising style approach, which is you would have your sort of your flagship, almost Apple Store style agency with all the trimmings and really cool place where clients come, where staff would come and have a great time, but you don't necessarily need to be in there day in, day out, but you've got a sort of footprint of somewhere where people can exist and can kind of, work collaboratively, creatively, like brainstorm, kind of, do all that stuff, which is really important. I think the remote working side has allowed some real efficiencies. It's given people, especially people, if you've got families, or you've got, you work sort of further out of cities or towns, then I think being able to break it up a bit. So I personally, I feel like a hybrid approach of, being with your team, because you can do a lot of stuff on or Zoom, on Teams, or whatever it may be, but that face to face, I also think if you're, I was lucky that I managed to be close to lots of very talented people over my career, and I learned an incredible amount from them, being just overhearing, kind of creative directors, MDs, seeing creatives in action, like you say, strategists. And if you're only on specific meetings as someone who's junior, then you don't get that exposure. So I feel like for people who are maybe a bit younger coming into this industry, they might lose out, and that needs to be worked in somehow. There needs to be something that needs to be thought through, so you could have workshops or whatever it might be, because you won't have that overhearing people chatting or how they deal with situations and all of that, all that learning that you have by just being in the space, as well as obviously actually chatting to people and making friends at work, all that side of it, which is really important. So I think it depends. I guess it's allowed, from a startup perspective, it means that your cost to start with can be a lot less, which is great because you can kind of get going. And then I think if you want to grow, fast, then being able to have time with your team as the person who's kind of really running it helps build that energy and momentum, which is important.
I told you 45 minutes is going to fly by, right?
Why is it done? No.
Yeah, it just flips by. Laura, what are you excited about? What's exciting over the next, like, I know we're coming into summertime anyway, so it's just a general over exciting time of the year coming out of winter, but like I feel your energy, and I think there's some kind of there's a spark, there's an excitement. Is there anything that you're really looking forward to in the pipeline, and are you just generally feeling excited that we're all kind of getting back to normal now and people can work and flourish?
Yeah, I'm so happy to be able to go and meet people, and we've got some really interesting. We do quite a bit of stuff with the US, so being able to kind of go over to New York and over to LA and meet clients and actually see them. Yeah, and just getting back to, I did an incredible amount of networking when I started up, so I met so many interesting people. So I'm happy that that's back, because I also find that sometimes when you're if you're working remotely as well, or if a year can be a long time, and you set up with all these goals of what you want, and then I personally find sometimes that I go to these networking events, or when I meet people, they sort of like re-energize me and inspire me. And you see someone doing something and they're brilliant, and it kind of kicks you back into action to then go, right, I need to get on with that thing I said I was going to do. Let's do it. And so just those meetings and those encounters and being inspired by other people, I thought when you're at a startup, it's really important to sort of reignite that energy along the way. So I'm excited about that, and obviously summer.
Beautiful. Well, we're excited to be on this journey with you, and we really appreciate all the help that you've given us at Retribe, and for doing this Facebook Live with me today. I really appreciate it. If people need to get in touch with you, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, they could. You want to send me an email? It's
do you know what? I'll just put the link.
Put the link. I can put it. So we've got Instagram, LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I can.
Yeah. You just send me the links, and I'll put them into the Facebook Live. And again, thank you so much for joining me today. Hang on, I'll turn the live off. Hang on, so we can have a closing word just to arrange our next meeting. And thank everybody for joining us today. Laura, thank you. Thank you, Elephant and Castle community. Don't forget to join me on Thursday at 11 a.m. for another Tough Through Tender gathering. We'll see you all then. Thanks a lot. Bye.